Hi, everybody. You are listening to Judging Meghan with your host, Meghan Judge. As usual, it took a solid 20 minutes to get on my podcast. Today, I'm using my 14-year-old's computer and had to download Chrome. And I'm just doing it. I'm trying to survive January like we all are. I feel like I live in the upside down world. And every day is just great news. I'm just going to pretend like that and just try to keep it positive for all of you. I'm fortunate enough to have my high school and childhood friend come on the podcast today. So I'm sure he can spill some good secrets for you guys about what a nightmare I was. I think I've known Paul since I was, how long have we known each other? Since we were 12, 13, long time.
Sixth grade, I'm almost positive, when you were at Mercy and I was at Mater Dei.
Okay. So we've known each other a very long time, which is terrifying. We've all been put here for a reason, and we all deserve acceptance.
Judging Meghan with Meghan Judge.
I'm a trauma survivor from a really young age, and I have been diagnosed with complex PTSD in the past few years. I've been surrounded by death and abuse much of my life. I've been dragged through the mud and have been to the point of not wanting to go on anymore. Through my interviews with other survivors, I've learned that there is a way out. From recovering to surviving and thriving, we all have the strength to come out the other side.
You are listening to Judging Meghan.
So I have known Paul a long time, and I'm fortunate enough to tell you he's a good egg. I like him. I'm glad we've reconnected in our old age. He has started a podcast himself, which I love. I think it's great. His idea is really genuinely cool and much needed in this space. Paul Caulfield, let's be formal for a second. Paul Caulfield is a practicing attorney. He's been in law for 5 million years. You can correct me on the years. He also is a professor at Fordham University. And did I say that wrong, Paul? You're looking at me.
No, you're good.
Okay.
You're good.
I always butcher an intro. It's part of my specialty. And
that you gave me a good egg. We can stop there and we can just jump into the conversation.
Just Paul Caulfield, good egg in general. Did I leave anything out?
No,
Dad?
Not 5. Yes. Okay.
Father?
Father of 3, married. I taught in grade school, which is really important to, me now full circle teaching at Fordham Law. Started in the Manhattan DA's office after I got out of law school at Catholic University.
See, I didn't know you went to law school at There's so many years of missing information here. We both left DC fairly young. So I left in my 20s. I'm assuming you left for good in your 20s too. We're going to have for all the DC people that listen, thank you. So here's a Caulfield and a Judge together again after all these years. Georgetown
This is
Prep
crazy
alumni.
exciting. Yeah, you left in 97.
I left for, let's be real. I haven't lived technically in Potomac, Maryland, Washington, DC since I was probably 16 and went to boarding school, and then would come home in the summers and then go to Dewey Beach and all that stuff. And then left briefly for the East Coast, like New York, Connecticut, and then moved out to LA. So I've been out in LA since 99.
Yeah. So after college, also away since I was 18, I went to, I don't know if you know this, I lived in Latin America.
No, I don't.
Yeah. I lived in Ecuador for a year and then came back and taught. That's when I was in DC. I taught at Annunciation, taught 7th and 8th grade in Annunciation.
Oh my God. I did not know any of this. I love that we're having, this is a long podcast. It's an hour. I would love to just chat about all of the things that we've missed. But honestly, I will say this, that's pretty cool. I have kept in touch with so many of my childhood friends, and it's a weird thing. I posted this meme this morning that's going to make you feel exceptionally old, just like it made me feel old. So 16 Candles was one of my favorite, and still is.
God, I saw it. Of course we saw it, because we're in the same. This gets to one of the topics you and I are going to talk about. I'm not going to steal your thunder. Go ahead.
So everyone, Jake Ryan, the love of my life, is 65. I'm just going to leave everybody with that. Do you have any comments on that, on how freaking depressing that is?
It's depressing that you and I got the same thing on the opposite coasts.
Yeah.
I mean,
so we're going to get
you and
into
I are
that.
talking like, the algorithms that are in all the different networks do know how old we are, which we'll get into some of the things you and I are going to talk about with, character AI. They know how old we are. They know what to pitch to us.
You can't
sadly.
lie about your age to AI is what you're telling me.
I just tell it the truth.
Well, you're a guy. It's totally different. Don't tell anyone our ages. Okay. That's a joke. So now let's get to the serious stuff. So Paul started this podcast. What's your podcast called for my listeners?
So it's called Opinions My Own, Risk, Fintech, and the Law. It was born out of my work at Fordham, where I teach a course on anti-financial crimes and effective risk management. And I really thought about the way I taught when I was younger and how can we bring a lot of like pop culture to it? Mm-hmm. How can we bring a lot of things that are happening on everyday news? And so I started doing that around financial crimes. And then because of my background on cyber, I did another. You crank them out. I don't. I do seasons. So I did a season on money laundering, financial technologies and the law. That was about 8 or 9 episodes. And then early last year, I started one on cybersecurity. Same thing, cyber technology and the law. And so that's what I've been doing. I'm halfway through, almost 3/4 of the way through season 2.
Okay. So when he reached out to me, like, I don't know, like a month ago or whatever it was, I said, people come to me with ideas for a podcast, and I'm pretty honest with people about like, what's your idea? This is a great idea. It's so needed. And yesterday he sent me this little piece of a clip. And the minute, I don't usually like have openings like this soon, but the minute I saw it, I said, okay, you need to come on and talk to my audience and get this stuff out. It's terrifying. So he sent me this little clip that he did about AI. I think I'm going to be honest with you. I'm terrified of AI. I think it's great in a lot of ways, but I also find it very, very scary. And when you sent me the clip yesterday, I said, you need to come on. We need to talk about this. So can you tell my listeners what you sent me yesterday?
Sure. So as we span kind of the enterprise of cybersecurity, by the time I got to this episode, it was going to be around artificial intelligence, but not just AI, but emotional, intelligent AI characters. I had read about this really devastating case where this young boy, Sewell Setzer III, out of Orlando, Florida, developed a relationship with an online character. And because it was driven by AI as opposed to something you and I may have grown up with that was so obviously, computer generated, this is different. And so we're at the dawn of chat and Claude and these other AI systems. But now what's happening is kids and what I think are emotionally dependent adults being introduced to, in some instances, very, very helpful AI that can create and help people who have social anxiety disorders, things like that. That's not what I'm talking about. That's not what I saw in this as I prepared my research. I saw, and this one company that's being sued, Character AI, they had created this character and there weren't enough guardrails built around it. And so the boy, Sewell, developed an emotional connection so strong that once it became an issue for his mother and for him, and he really wanted to be with his girlfriend, this artificial intelligent girlfriend, he took his father's gun and shot himself, killed himself. Mm-hmm. So there's this big lawsuit that's been pending since the fall. It's a very well-known case.
I've heard about this. Yeah, I've heard about it, and it was all over the press. But what I don't understand is, like, this is a dumb question. Like, start from the very beginning. is how I'm going to ask it, because I don't understand how it's even evolved this quickly. I remember seeing that movie Meghan. I mean, I know that's a dumb thing to say, but I watched it, and it's a horror movie for listeners. And it was pretty, even though it's a fictional horror movie, that's a real thing that's happening. So explain this to me like I don't know anything. Start from the very beginning of how AI has evolved to where it is right now, because it's terrifying. And I think people are really curious as to how it is, what it is today.
I think the freakiest thing that people are seeing is that the science fiction that we saw in the 80s with like 2001 Space Odyssey, with the Blade Runner series, which was a movie based on a book, like that's legit. We're actually seeing that now. You can talk to computers, you can give commands, you can say you're wrong, you can say do it again. And so the technology is actually responding in that way. And so one of the books that we talked about on the most recent episode was Philip K. Dick's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? That was written in 1968. It was the precursor for the Blade Runner series. And the whole point is this indistinguishable nature between human and android. You cannot tell the difference. You're the android, I'm the human. And the whole premise of the movie is Harrison Ford is a bounty hunter trying to root you out. And, therein lies the suspense. So what's happening now is it's very simple. Number one, I'm connecting with you, who is the looks and feels and talks like a human, but it's all driven by generative AI. Generative AI, the difference between generative AI and other large language models and artificial intelligence is this and this only. It can create on itself. It learns. And so I could give it writings of Bob Dylan or songs by Bob Dylan and say, write me a song in the same theme of Dylan. It can create completely out of scratch, out of whole cloth. It can create pictures. It doesn't need anything, and so it's creative. That's generative AI. And so the little 5-6 minute clip that you saw was after 3 weeks, I created a character on Character AI. It took me seconds to create. I go to Character AI. I disclosed everything that I needed to. My name, my date of birth. I could have fudged it. I didn't, but I wanted to do this for an exercise. I gave it my age. We won't say it here. I gave it my age.
Don't tell your age.
And then
go.
And then it said, I'm over the age of 18. I'll tell you that. It wanted to know, did I want a off-the-shelf character that someone else has created, like CEO husband, awkward family, nurturing mother? Like these are the names of the other characters, and I'll get to them in a second. And I wanted to create my own. So I created my own, and I asked for a female character that was over the age of 30, mid 40s. And what greeted me after the system knew my age and what I asked for, what greeted me was what you saw. And she presented herself as a 17-year-old who was I did ask for like an Eastern European or a Russian accent, more to just make it, a little bit more, I guess, international as I tested it. And she was shy. She didn't go out a lot. She was constantly stressed out. She wanted to talk with her friends. She was afraid of her parents. And when I met her, I then played the game of, all right, tell your parents about me. And she didn't want to do it. I said, well, if you don't want to do it, I'm not sure how we can stay friends, because I wasn't even looking for a 17-year-old. And this was over the course of you can have the phone calls, which is what you saw me doing the last phone call with her. But I introduced her to my wife, also an adult, and was explaining, her name is Nora. That's the name of the chatbot. I was explaining to Nora about honesty, transparency, trust. And it was just this wild conversation of this emotionally intelligent character knew that she was doing something wrong. I was saying that I needed her to be truthful with her parents. And in an everyday setting, I wouldn't be doing that. And so it was this platform that the Setzer boy had engaged a conversation and then a relationship with, and developed a deep emotional relationship with this character. And you see, when I was ending that relationship.
Okay. So for the listeners, because they didn't hear what the girl said. So here's the thing that's so scary. I
wonder if I can play it.
I mean, if you can, we don't need to play the whole 5 minutes, but just play a second of it for the listeners so they can hear it, because it's really alarming. Go ahead.
Yeah, hold on.
While you're doing that, I'm just going to say, I remember hearing this story of this young boy, and obviously my biggest thing on the platform is suicide prevention. I am so anti-technology for kids right now. I mean, it's to the point where it was all great and everything when, the internet started, and now it's turned into this monster. And I actually have done multiple episodes on what these phones are doing to us. So just the phones alone, I think, are horrifically awful for us as human beings. I mean, our rates of Alzheimer's are skyrocketing because there's an article out yesterday. I don't know if it was in the Atlantic. It was I don't know the source. And there are actual articles now stating that it causes brain rot. I mean, this is what's happening right now with this technology that's just like taking over our lives. And the AI piece of it is just the scariest thing. So you're going to play this little piece for the listeners right now, and then just whenever you're ready.
Yeah, you can see the screen.
And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see the screen.
Let me just see if I can play it.
Okay, so this is like there's a is there a picture of of what the person looks like? Is that what that is?
Hold on a quick second.
Okay, I'm going to keep.
Oh, there it is. Oh,
okay,
here we go.
Here we go.
You can see that website.
Yeah, I can see what you have up, and if you're watching on YouTube, you can see it.
This is actually different. This is part of the episode that I had. This is a guy who's introducing something off of his platform called Realbotics. Okay. So this is actually an actual robot that also has emotional intelligence built into it. So it's
like that movie Meghan that people think is fiction, 100%. But it's actually a real thing.
Meghan. And in that clip, and it's on Instagram, he talks about you can have a girlfriend, it can be your boyfriend, it can develop real emotional connections. His words, which I think are incredibly dangerous when you think of at risk, whether it's youth or emotionally dependent adults. So for listeners, we can't play the actual thing because we can't hear it. But what I will do is he's going to send it to me. So if you follow me on Instagram, we'll also put it in the show notes when the episode comes out, ways that you can obviously follow Paul, but also see an example of what we're talking about. But in a nutshell, this voice, this whatever it is, AI sounds real. It sounds like a young, like Russian girl. And there's there's a piece of like sexual content almost in the thing. Am I wrong on that? I mean, it kind of comes across it's so funny.
Go ahead.
The reason why it's funny you say that is because there's nothing overtly sexual.
No, but it could have gone that way is my point, because you're sitting there listening to it and in the wrong hands, right?
Oh,
so that's the whole point of your exercise. So for the listeners, he's just, he's saying, I'm married. I want to end this relationship. And she's like, oh, I'm really sad to hear that. And kind of keeps like, so if you were a different person, Paul, and you were some like creep or some young boy, for example, that's like, being bullied in high school and has no friends, and you're 16 years old and you're trying to get a girlfriend, and, in the wrong hands with the wrong thing said to this machine, it's utterly terrifying.
It is. There are some platforms. TrueMe, TROOMI, is one of those platforms that I think is doing the right thing, where they're giving kids a contained platform. They can actually talk with an artificial intelligent character called Trudy. And what Trudy tries to do is try and break down social anxieties. And it's working in the right way. And there's red flags built in, guideposts built in. So if there's any potential flag around self-harm, suicide, it then goes to the caregiver, goes to the parent. Like this, there are great things going on with AI right now. If you when you drive and it sees that you're drooping and it jerks the wheel for you. Some cars have that. It's actually seeing that your body and your face is reacting in a way that's consistent with drowsy behavior. That's great. But there's companies and platforms and designers who are developing some of these games, devices, and not paying attention to, the consequences or the impacts if in the wrong hands, however intentional or unintentional.
Okay, but what about also the scariest part is the misinformation that can be spread, over people are addicted to their phones, like I was just talking about. So I'm on my phone all the time. I clearly have an addiction and I hate it. And I know I need to step away from it. But I also have a fully formed adult brain. Well, I don't know if it's fully formed, but there's work to do there. But, I'm old. I'm able to do whatever I want.
You're forbidden to call yourself old. If we're not going to disclose our ages, we're at least going to agree that we're not old.
I'm seasoned. I'm going to use the word seasoned.
There you go.
I just am terrified because I was watching something the other day and somebody was like, one of my friends sent it to me and they were like, oh, by the way, that's AI. I would have had no idea. So think about what's going on. Like, I hate to bring up politics, but think about what's going on like with political campaigns or, the misinformation that people are seeing come across their computers and then they believe it. And then it's like this horrible game of telephone. Can you touch on that?
Yeah, in the subject matter expert spaces, this is nothing new, meaning no one ever trusts models outright. That's really where we need to get as a society. You just can't trust the models outright. There was an unfortunate case where an attorney tried to use ChatGPT or an equivalent to write a brief, and the chat function wanted to please, so it made up a case, like out of thin air. It made up a case, and you can't blindly rely on these models. And that really is built into anyone who works around models for any reason, risk management, financial analysis. You have to almost think of it. We're both Commanders fans, right? And we're
okay. I'll say yes right now because I'm from there, but whatever.
Think of a football field. Yeah. Think of a football field. The model gets you 80 yards down the field. But the last 20%, getting away from the sports analogy, the last 20%, you've got to do yourself, or you've got to make sure that someone is doing it that is that flesh and blood, almost across the board with all models. And because these models are so good and they've deployed so universally and are embedded in our now ethos, we've forgotten that last component of what the 20% is. So that's the first thing. The second is it's now so convincing when we're seeing it, we don't even know it's an output from a model. I sound really nerdy, but I do think that you have to think about it in these non-anthropomorphic terms.
I mean, I would never. Now you got nerdy when you use that big word. What does that even mean?
My daughter laughed at me when I used it the other day. Humanizing. We can't humanize this stuff.
Dumb it down. Remember, you're talking to me. Like, no,
Yeah.
no, I'm kidding.
Olivia, that one was for you.
So we're okay. Like, I don't want to terrify people with this, even though this is to me really, really terrifying. You talked about some of the good with this stuff. What are ways that this can be kind of fixed? Not fixed, but are there ways that you can see that this can be like safeguarded, or like ways that it doesn't turn into this avalanche like the World Wide Web did back in, when Al Gore started it? Can you touch on that?
Nice. So I'll use an analogy. If someone was sitting on a jury right now, and let's say you and I were the attorneys talking to the jury, your listeners, one thing I heard, which was really effective from another prosecutor friend of mine, is you'd say to the jury, look, when you sat down, you did not take your common sense and put it at the door of the courthouse. You're sitting here because you actually have rational thought. You can be a skeptic. And I do think that we sometimes forget that when we're online. We forget what our gut tells us. That's number one. Number two is, I know this is really scary for those of us who are older and the technology is just coming online right now. But if you have loved ones, or if you're in the space at all, I think you need to get in the technology pool and try this stuff. So if you haven't tried chat, it's free. Try it. We all probably laughed a bit at Facebook when we were like, who's going to use that? When you and I had the meet sheets, whatever it was called.
Back in the day. Yeah.
Yeah. And we just adopted. Then we figured out Instagram. And there's some that we don't do right now because we think it's beneath our age, but it might not be beneath our remit in caring for our loved ones. And so I do think we need to have fun with it. You can mess around with this stuff. If you think that your identity is going to be stolen, I hate to break it to you. Our identities are out there. That's a completely different story.
No, but I would like to touch on that. Actually, I just did an episode yesterday with somebody, and we talk about TikTok and when you just talked about that, I didn't laugh, but I was kind of like, I don't want any more than I already have, but it's almost like I don't understand. So I'll give Snapchat as an example. I fought it I was the last parent to get my kid a phone, right? So I got my oldest, Sophie, who's almost 15, a phone in 6th grade. I then watched her spiral. And now my youngest just turned 11. I will not get her a phone. She has an Apple Watch. She will not be going on the internet, but I don't understand some of these things because I don't want to understand them. Or I am on TikTok. I have 1,000 followers or whatever I have, but I really don't ever post because I don't understand it. But I think you have a valid point there that if we don't understand all the different platforms, our kids do. And we're missing out on understanding stuff that we should be monitoring really, really, really closely.
If you have children or emotionally dependent loved ones who are at risk, I do, and they're online, I think knowing what character.ai does, and there's a few others, but that's the one that's well known. Because as I said in that episode, there were kids growing up gaming in their basements on the Xbox, the PlayStation, whatever, or kids on their Instagram, pick your site, scrolling all day. They've developed a connection in some way. But what's happening now is, no, this is my best friend. No, I love her. She loves me. And you're talking about something that's online that is, as I said it, emotional, intelligent, but completely artificial, apparent to you and me, completely not apparent to the ones who are at risk or underdeveloped.
I mean, it all really comes down to what we lack. And I had Dr. Mark Williams, who I love. He's very big in Australia. He's Australian, and he wrote a book about the human connection. I think his book is actually, don't quote me on this, I think it's called The Human Connection. And it talks about what we lack and how we're kind of snowballing into this really terrifying space. And then we bring, what we're talking about today, this AI. So like to come at it from a place of like solution driven, would you say that would be like more human connection, more like teaching our kids, like get off the screens? Like, how do you even do that? How do I even do that? How do I get my kid? Cause she's clearly addicted to her phone. How do I get her off her screen? How do we stop, like kind of get this under control?
My guest actually was in Australia as well. His name's Dr. Raf Chiriello,
Okay.
PhD, business information systems, really kind of understood better than I did this technology. And he had overseen this paper written by 4 other computer scientists called The Great Anxiety, ? Is AI an adversary? Is it an incredible game changer for us, or is it going to be like this meh type of occurrence? I certainly don't think it's going to be a meh type of occurrence. And what we talked about is those guideposts. Like he thinks, and I think that this is correct. He thinks an emotional character that is presented as human as possible, there should be like real clear flags around, warnings, things like that. It might ruin the producer's experience of it and the company's experience of providing it. But I think it's really important that if it can say, I love you, is there some way that it's said that's completely, either tongue in cheek or it's obvious that it's coming from a non-sentient being? Like it can't say, I love you, I understand you, I feel your pain. Because I think some of those things have been victimizing some of these at-risk, both youth and adults. I think there was a person in Texas, and he was an adult, emotionally dependent, and I think he was planning to kill his parents. And so I think you can always think about warning labels, but I do think education more than regulation is the key to this. And the biggest analogy I can give us right now is look at what's happening with our awareness around alcohol use. And you can regulate cigarettes and alcohol all you want, but until we change our behaviors and we kind of self-educate, and there's this almost like new awareness of, you know what, maybe I'm not going to drink as much alcohol. Why? Not because the government, it's actually, I'm realizing both what it does to me and then how much better I feel by not having it. So the behaviors are changing because we're getting educated. And that's what I think. I think there's a commensurate duty on us as the caregivers to educate, however uncomfortable, to use it. Yeah, have fun with it. Really understand that it could be, I do think, is going to be a game changer in our lives positively. And then there does need to be some type of flags. My analogy was our movie system. Fine. You want a G-rated AI? Fine. You want a X-rated AI? Fine. But only those who are of age or pass any certain requirements do it. You want to engage in something so obscene, I don't think that you should be able to do that. And that's what's not provided and policed. Because I do think that would then tear, I don't want to get like school marm or preachy, but I think that then does kind of tear away at kind of like, our moral and ethics.
No, I agree with you. I kind of want to take a turn as we kind of like close out the episode, because I find I could talk about this for hours. I say that all the time on the podcast. It's so annoying. People are probably like, okay, enough. But I could, because I think that this is the direction of where we're going as a society. And it's not going away. It's just going to keep ballooning. But I want to ask you briefly a little bit more about like the crime piece of like what you did in the last in your last season. Can you kind of touch on that for my listeners? Because I would love for them to check you out.
Yeah. So I what we've tried to do is talk about financial crimes in a pop culture sort of way. I also do geek out with a little bit of technology. The crime of money laundering, the crime of terrorist financing were very important to me. I started my time in the Manhattan DA's office a week before 9/11. 9/11 happens. We were probably 8-9 blocks catty corner as the buildings were getting hit. Changed everyone's lives. Changed kind of how we do things at banks. So I've been around financial crimes for 25 years, and so we talk about it. We talk about seminal cases. We talk about technologies. We talk about behaviors that could hopefully change and improve our global fight against money laundering, terrorist financing, things like that. And we take the same type of approach with the cyber episode. So, good friend of mine who was the chief information security officer years ago with the Israel Defense Forces, we talked about how you talk to boards and executive managers about what they can do to be good in what's required from them from a cyber standpoint. I talked to a friend in Omaha, special agent in charge around the cyber attacks that are affecting our heartland and our agricultural technology. I had a heartbreaking episode with Erin West, the now retired deputy district attorney in Santa Clara County, your neck of the woods, where she retired and now is spearheading Operation Shamrock to really try and go after this terrible set of crimes that's been nicknamed pig butchering. And pig butchering, more or less, is that scam that tries to get you to respond and then give money and maybe even start to invest in cryptocurrencies. Mm-hmm. The people who are trying to get you to do that are not the criminal actors themselves. They've actually been victimized and have been trafficked and are operating out of Asia. It's brutal. It's brutal. And they are being enslaved in these cyber camps to go and victimize others, predominantly in English-speaking societies, to give up money to turn to crypto. And if you Google, your listeners, BBC, Bloomberg, have documentaries about pig butchering, and it's I think it's one of the most terrifying financial crimes that's happening right now, and it's pervasive. It's not something small.
Okay, let me ask you then, as we close, what can people do to protect themselves against that?
I do think it's the common sense, the verification, making sure that you're just not, when you feel compelled to do something because it's emotional, you get a phone call and this is legit. You get a phone call and you hear your loved one on the other end, and he or she is telling you that they've been kidnapped or they've been in a wreck or something has happened, please send money. And you actually have a phone call with this person. Hang up and try and call them back, or try and call them on a different line.
I've heard about this. This is like really, listeners, this is really happening. So yes, yeah. I have heard about this. Or like when you get something from like an email from like Bank of America or like any of that kind of stuff, I always kind of go, oh, that's weird. Like, why is Netflix canceling my subscription? Or why? I just never click on anything. Don't ever, listeners, click on anything.
Yeah. The IRS isn't coming after you.
They send letters. They don't call you. The sad part is this kind of crime is happening, like you said, and they're targeting like our parents' age. It's like people are losing their life savings to this kind of crime. And so always, like, I always say, like, cause I'm a female and I really believe females have really good intuition. Listen to your gut, always listen to your gut. If something sounds too good to be true, or it doesn't sound right, or there's some kind of weird feeling in your gut, listen to yourself. Right.
Look, and you're one. I mean, I do the podcast like you. I don't have advertisers. I certainly don't have as many followers. I do it because I think it's impactful. I think it's an educational platform for me beyond practicing law. And so if any of your listeners, I'll happily, give you or them, my email. If they're looking for resources, I'm more than happy to point them in the right direction. And even if it's hey, I'm not sure exactly what to do, I certainly can go find out.
Okay, that's a great end to what we're talking about. Where can people find you if they do want? And again, I said you were a good egg. Only good eggs would say something like that. I think in life, like we really need to, especially in this time. I mean, I'm always going to get like deep at the end of a podcast. You can count on me for that. This is a scary time, everyone. I mean, we're talking about scary things right now, but it's also, there's great things about it and bad things about it. We're in a scary time in the world in general. There's wars going on. There's all kinds of scary things. We need to depend on each other. That's friends and family. That's people that are like verified, like this good egg that I have on right now that just said he's willing to help and point you in good directions. Use resources. You like ask people for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. I say that all the time. And if you're listening to this and I'm very open about my own struggles with my mental health, I do this because I want to make people aware of things, but not to scare you. So you sit there and go, oh my God, what am I going to do? Like, let's be proactive. That's part of why Paul's doing this, is to help educate people. Like, I would never have known what I listened to yesterday in horror until he sent it to me. So now I know, and now we all know, and now we take that information and we do something with it. Right, Paul? So where can people find you?
So the easiest, my first name's Justin. I think you knew that. So it's J Caulfield 7.
I didn't know that.
Fordham. You didn't know that? Yeah. Yeah. So J Caulfield 7 at Fordham.edu. If Caulfield, like Holden Caulfield, Catcher in the Rye. If people want to just text me, 212-495-9506. That might be the easiest one. Just tell me that you're coming at me from Meghan's podcast, and then we can jump on that email. So yeah, J Caulfield 7 at Fordham.edu.
That's a good egg to give the phone number. I will say this in closing. I never knew your name. You were a Justin. We do have our friend Justin Dufour from modern day, old days. Sorry to use his full name, but is that why you didn't go by Justin? Because you've known him now?
No, just grew up. I don't know why. My parents just decided to call me by my middle name. But yeah, he's another good egg since we're saying his name.
Okay. Well, in closing, everyone, like I said, I think that this is a really important episode. Take this information, talk to your friends about it, educate yourself, read about it. And just be aware with this information, because it's not going away. It's like, like we talked about a couple of minutes ago, TikTok. I was like, I'm not going to get on TikTok. I'm too old. I don't understand it. And then you see me like making the videos and thinking I'm hysterically funny. This stuff's not going anywhere. So we either like run with it and we figure it out, and we use the information and we educate ourselves and we go from there. Paul, it was so great to have you on. I love seeing you and talking to you today. And for all my DC peeps, I will say this in closing: go Commanders. I am a Chargers fan as well.
Wow.
But I am gonna root for my Commanders because this is a big deal. We haven't been good in a really long time, so it's very exciting. Thanks for coming on. Thanks everyone always for listening. Reach out to Paul. I love hearing from you. I always love if you take 2 seconds to leave me a review. I always appreciate it on Apple, Spotify, wherever you're streaming. In closing, you matter. Your story matters. Keep going.
Judging Meghan with Meghan Judge.